From that very first comment about my body in 3rd grade to seeing a picture of myself not long after giving birth to my 4th child, my body hatred remained. Thankfully, that's not the end of my story. Hi, I'm Joanna. I'm a dance teacher with a dream of seeing people of all shapes and sizes heal their relationships with their bodies and find joy in movement. In my last video, I shared with you my story of how I began to hate my body. A story that might be similar to a story that you have to tell. But today I want to tell you how that has started to turn around, though I'm still on a journey and I have by no means arrived. I think that there has been a real shift in my thinking, in that I now notice when I'm falling into that. I acknowledge it and I say, oh yeah, doing it again. And I can say that to myself with grace and love. The last couple years have been the most difficult years of my life. Our family moved, we had a baby. One of our children was really, really struggling. And it brought us all into this place of survival mode and depression and anxiety, just sort of in the water of our family, of our household. And though I didn't think I had ever struggled with anxiety before, it became clear that that was something that was going on, that my body had been responding to the chaos around me by going into this protective fight or flight state a lot of the time. So, for the first time in my life, I sought counseling. I tried a few therapists and then actually found a spiritual director who I really resonated with. And I felt like I could be really open and honest with her, and that she was so accepting and affirming of who I was. And I really appreciated the perspective she brought of being a person of faith and reminding me that I was beloved. She started to notice in our conversations that I was often thinking negative things about myself. And it wasn't just tied to my appearance, it was tied to a lot of aspects of myself. I just felt like I didn't really like myself very much. I felt like the narrative that was in my mind most of the time was, you are a failure. So, of course, that applies to all the body image stuff that I told you about in my last video, but it also applied to me as a parent, as a dancer, as a wife, as a homemaker, as a dance teacher. All the different roles that I played, I pretty much felt like I was failing at all of them all the time. And even some of the things about the way my brain works, being forgetful sometimes or being disorganized. I remember her asking me the question, what would God say to you when you think that about yourself? What would God say to you? And I said, from God's perspective, I knit you together in your mother's womb as a person who forgets things, which was just so striking to me, to realize that that could be part of God's intention for who I am. And that piece of knowing how loved I am by God, that was the beginning of me beginning to accept myself and love myself. For a few weeks, I had to be really intentional to turn around the the habit of criticizing myself when I looked in the mirror, and I think it was more than a physical criticism. It was a criticism of my whole self, and so for several weeks, every time I looked in the mirror, I would just look at myself and say, "I love you, Joanna." And it felt silly at first to say that to myself. And we hear about, how important it is to love yourself and care for yourself. But those messages just sound like noise after a while if they don't sink in deep and change us. Those visits with my spiritual director, um, they started to really change things for me. And um, I started to be able to see myself. I think for a long time I have struggled with not really having a strong sense of self. And I think it goes all the way back to those comments about my body in elementary school. I think I had been trying to be invisible for a really long time and wanting to not do anything that would bring attention to myself because then that attention could lead to criticism. And it was like my sense of self was already so fragile that if someone criticized it, it would just like fall completely apart. So have I arrived? Do I look at myself in the mirror or as I'm getting dressed and say, yeah, this body is good just the way it is. My worth is not dependent on this body. My worth is something much deeper than that. No, I've not arrived. um, it's something that I still struggle with. I was just taking classes at a dance intensive this past week, and there was a lot of comparison going on for me in my mind, um, and a lot of self doubt. But I think the difference for me now is that I'm naming it, and I'm saying, yes, these things run so deeply in my brain and in my soul that they're not going to change overnight. But in naming them, I have said, I'm going to resist this lie. And that has made a huge difference.